Hi, welcome to Power the Network. I'm your host, Tim Locker, Vice President of Broadband here at CBM. Today's guest, we have Jason Johns. He's Vice President of Construction for Gateway Fiber. He's a wealth of knowledge. I've got a lot of background in construction engineering. And today we have a great conversation about building fiber to the home projects and some of the challenges in today's market. Thanks for joining us. Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate you being here. We know you're a busy guy, so thank you. You spent 22 years with Centurylink, and about a year ago, you made the switch, and you're working now for Gateway Fiber. Tell me a little bit, what about Gateway Fiber grabbed your attention, made you want to go to work for them?
Well, thanks for having me here. Really appreciate the opportunity. 22 years at Lumen, I had a great time. I started there with Quest Communications back in the long haul. Had a lot of different roles and responsibilities, a lot of friends. But it was time to move on. About 3 years ago or so, I knew I wanted a change.
Yeah.
I knew what I wanted. I wanted to get to probably a smaller company, a growth company, and one that was, fit from people and culture perspective.
Okay.
So I wasn't in a hurry to change.
Yeah.
I just started looking, and the Gateway opportunity came up, like you said, about a year ago.
Yeah.
And meeting with them and doing research and knowing some of the people over there, it made the jump. And it's been fantastic. I love it over there. We have a aggressive build forecast in front of us. The people are great, and it's just been a wonderful time so far.
That's awesome. That's great. So Gateway, they're a relatively new company. Founded in, I believe, 2019 from Centurylink Construction. Shout out to those guys. So they started building fiber to the home in communities in and around St. Louis. Now, 4 or 5 years later, like you said, your growth plan, you're jumping into multiple states, building fiber like crazy. What are some of the challenges that you face with such an aggressive build schedule?
Well, it's a lot of fun for first, right? I mean, so we have a new markets team that really identifies our next area of opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so really, when you talk about going into a new market, there's a lot of different hurdles, challenges that you got to get through. One, you got to educate the new community on who you are. You get up to, who is Gateway Fiber? And so,
do you think that's more difficult when you say you make a jump from, it's one thing to go from St. Louis to Columbia, maybe another thing to go from St. Louis to Minneapolis. Do you find that more difficult to educate the customers?
It's similar. If they haven't heard about you, mm-hmm. I think in the Missouri market it was a little more natural because we were just founded in Missouri and our roots are here, and so we know the landscape. But when you go, the questions we get when we go to like Minneapolis, for instance, we're building in Blaine and Coon Rapids right now, is like, why here? Why did you choose us? Why did you disconnect 1,000 miles away? And so that education is part of it.
And that's one thing I was going to ask too. Yeah, how do you identify that market that's so far away? What are the things that you're looking for, as a business plan to where do you identify that market?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into play there. I mean, so when we look at new markets, we're looking at what the competitive landscape looks like. Is there fiber to the home in these communities already, or are they underserved? What is the density of the market? Yeah. Because I mean, if it's you got a lot of underserved markets that might be 3,000 or 4,000 people, and they need to be served as well. But up there, there's 100,000 underserved. And so when you look at where to go next, you also want, a little bit of runway, from a growth perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. How long will it take you to build to 100,000 homes, 100,000 folks?
Well, I mean,
is that even in the plan? Of that, how much of that market do you plan to?
It's less about what you can build, because I mean you can ramp with drill crews and material to build however much you want, but it's more about what the cities that you're building in can handle, because you have locate issues, you have the cities can only process so many permits, there's throttling issues that the cities put on us.
Okay.
So what we try to do, and you've seen it in our St. Louis market, is we target 4 or 5 different cities so that we can grow at a more rapid pace. But the cities themselves are sometimes the biggest challenge to work with, and it's because they're just not supporting us. They got everything else they're supporting as well.
Well, why do you think that is? I mean, from the city's perspective, if you've got an underserved area, they have a lot to gain. People they pick where they're going based on broadband. That's just something people do these days. So I guess why would a city slow you down?
They don't do it on purpose,
okay,
but they got other work. They're doing their road projects, they're doing their storm and water upgrades, and then you got other people doing work in their cities. And so they only have so much capacity. There's only so much city staff that can do this for.
Okay, so you've got educating the customers in the new markets, hurdles that come along with the city, permits, et cetera. What are some of the other hurdles you face?
When we get into the construction phase of it, one of the biggest things that is problematic is utility locating. Outside of the city even. So you got your private party locating.
Yeah.
If there's a delay in them locating, which is a big problem. There's a lot of work going on in all these different municipalities, and so if they're slow to respond, we can't drill. From
yes.
an underground perspective, or if there's if it's mismarked, if they're not doing a good job locating it, it slows us down as well. And we are very, Gateway Fiber is very proud of our damage prevention program. We are hypersensitive to safe drilling practices.
Sure.
And so, it is important for us to drill safely in the communities because every household is a potential customer of ours.
Yeah.
And so if we hit something, even if it's not our fault because the locate was off, it still reflects on us.
Yeah.
And so that locating, that third party locating is a big issue for us right now.
So for some of the folks that may not know, what are the parameters of the locate? So you call in a locate. What's the time frame? Explain to people what that process, from the day you call it in to when you can actually work. How does that work?
Every state's a little bit different, but general guidelines are, from the time you call it in, it's 2 business days later. So you can start about 3 days later. Is that practical? If you're calling in large swaths of area, it's not. And so we try to manage that as well. From a locate perspective, the locate, are supposed to be within 2 foot of the facilities. So we're potholing the facilities, and that mark on the ground, that orange mark, which is a communication line, or the yellow mark, which is a gas line, is supposed to be within 2 foot of where they put that paint down. And so we pothole all those areas, and we start
to
working.
verify it, make sure
verify it's where it is,
yeah.
and how deep it is, because that'll change where we put our pipe.
All right, real quick, let me tell you a little bit about what we do here at CBM. So we're a manufacturer's rep located here in the Midwest. We work in 3 different vertical markets: utility space, we work in communications, and also commercial industrial markets. We've been in business since 1960, been an employee-owned ESOP since 1988. We really value that employee ownership in our organization, and I think it brings a lot to value our manufacturers as well. So if we can be of any service to you and help you in your next project, or if you're a manufacturer looking for expert representation, feel free to reach out to us here at CBM. That's cbmrep.com. One of the things that companies seem to struggle with is the balance between, quality and cost. And, we're all responsible to the bean counters. But what are you doing in your network to ensure that your infrastructure is going to last for 20, 30 years? How do you ensure that quality?
Well, first of all, from a cost perspective, there is a lot of downward pressure. We want to put the best network in place at a very, reasonably priced
Sure.
Price point. But it's twofold, right? I mean, when you look at, you can't gold plate it either, right? I mean, so you look at your labor costs, you look at your material costs, but it's all one, right? The way I look at it, it's really one unit, because you can have, you can be putting in a great product, and if you're using cheap labor, then they might not be putting it together right. Or you can be putting together, you can have a cheap product with good labor, and it's not going to last. So it's really finding, where your sweet spot is as a company on how to go forward with that. You really want to maintain the issues that we have in the industry right now, to be honest with you, is when those maintenance costs that come up. Do you want them in 5 years? Do you want them in 10 years? Do you want them, when is this thing going to fail?
Yeah.
That you're going to have to go out and replace that, and that's kind of that soft cost that is hard to articulate.
I guess in my opinion, I think a lot of companies don't budget for that. What I see is people are either getting funding or they're using CapEx funds and building these projects, but they're not accounting for that maintenance down the road, and that those maintenance dollars come right off the top end.
Yeah, I would say when you talk about budgeting, I think there is a budget for it, but it's kind of like a run rate budget. It's not on the front end. It's not like, hey, this is going to save me money 10 years down the road. Like, we're trying to be that thoughtful right now. We're trying to understand, whether, whatever that product is, whether that's that handhold, that splice case, what have you, that it is going to last. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's coming into the market, as you're well aware.
Yeah.
That's it's flimsy, it's cheap, and you can tell it's not going to last.
Yeah.
They try to sell you on it might be $15 cheaper. But really the cost savings for a lot of this stuff is getting that product that fits your build plan, that's a solid product, and that maybe drives down labor. If you can find that, I mean, you can spend more money on a handhold or a case if it actually is going to last longer. Or even in a better world, you can drive the labor costs down.
So the labor cost exceeds the material in the cost of the build. Labor is the bigger part of the puzzle.
It's the biggest driver.
Bigger part of the puzzle. So,
by far.
One of the things I think that can help with the labor cost is standards. Doing things consistently, more repetition, doing things the same thing over time. That's going to drive that labor cost down. And one of the things that we love, being able to work with companies like you to help establish those standards, kind of get in the weeds and figure out what products make sense, maybe different construction practices and those kinds of things. But how have those kinds of standards helped you, or do you even have standards in place that you go on day to day?
So we do have standards. From a material perspective and installation perspective, we are really fine tuning that right now. We've just started an initiative to drill down into that deeper. We want to make sure that we can present our standards to anybody that comes in, and we have for lack of a better term, kind of a research and development type of acceptance for anything new coming in.
Okay.
Because you really want to minimize your SKUs too. You just don't want to have all these different SKUs in your portfolio. And so we're hoping by the first of the year to have that really honed in and developed, so that we can start understanding what our next phase is, because there is going to be a new mousetrap that comes out, right? That you want to evaluate and put into your portfolio.
That's one thing that I wanted to ask too. So, a lot of, especially with contractors, you hear this a lot. We've done it this way for 20 years, and that's great, and that's some of the consistency we talk about. But how do you keep those standards then flexible, so that you're allowing these new and potentially better processes or products or such on, to get into the network? How you got to kind of play both sides of that fence a little bit.
Well, you do. I mean, I've told people forever, they ask me what I do, and I tell them I dig ditches for a living. That's what we do. We dig ditches, we put conduit in the ground, we put cable in the ground. But there's been a lot of innovation and change over those last 30 years, right? Yeah. So, I'm a big believer in trying new things. I'm a big believer in failing fast. So you want to evaluate it, and you don't want to just beat your head. But to your point, there's a lot of pushback on this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's gonna stifle innovation. That's gonna stifle progression.
Yep.
You got to be open-minded to try new things, to have that mindset that you're maybe not doing it right.
There could be a better way.
There is a better way.
Yeah.
It might not be for today, but eventually there's going to be a better way. That's just how we operate.
Yeah. No, that's a great perspective for sure. Okay. And so your title, you're Vice President of Construction.
That's right.
So tell me a little bit about your team now, and share a little perspective on how, what you've done in the past affects, your leadership role today.
Well, I started out as a field engineer, actually a field engineer assistant. We were building back in the late 90s conduit and cable from city to city, and so we were out in the field. And so, from a boot on the ground perspective,
Yep.
I've kind of done it all on that engineering and construction side, and I've made my way up. And so my team now, I've pretty much done everything they're doing, and so I understand what their day-to-day operation looks like.
Yeah.
So I can empathize with what they're doing, but I understand I can also see them areas of opportunity, so I can coach them up and so they can grow as well. So.
Okay, yeah, I think so. Yeah, having the boots on the ground and being in their position in the past is obviously huge. Give me a little bit of an idea of what your team looks like today. How many people, are working for you? Is it direct folks, or is it more a broad?
Well, my organization is it's growing. I mean,
Sure.
It's rapidly growing right now. So we have a couple different verticals within that. We have engineering, which is focused on just just what it is, the design and the inventory of our plant. We have construction managers that is responsible for running the crews and interfacing with the cities and the homeowners to resolve any issues like that. And then we have an inspection group as well that goes out and makes sure that post installation everything's to our standards. So those are the three main verticals.
Okay.
We have a centralized team too that just supports all of it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, great. So, being in the industry as long as you've had, I'm sure you've developed, a bunch of relationships over the years. Some probably good, some probably bad. Obviously, in my position, relationships are critical to our success. Is that the same for you in your position?
You'd be surprised how small telecommunication is. I mean, it is really for what, from a coast-to-coast perspective with all the different companies, it's really a very small industry from a people perspective.
A tight-knit group.
It is, and you're dealing with the same cities and railroads and coworkers and peers from other companies. It's very interesting for me. I talk about it a lot. You go to a different conference or you go to a city meeting, and it's the same people. They might be wearing a different hat,
Yep.
but it's the same people.
Yep.
They've changed jobs, just like I have recently.
Yep.
But it is those relationships, and that's the thing that really drives success is if you can foster those relationships.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and that's probably a lot of the reason why nobody leaves this industry, because it's in general great people, and it's really a tight knit group of folks, and it's really hard to leave for sure.
Well, there's some that we might want to leave, but but you got to work with those guys as well, right? I mean, and that I think that's what drives those of us that have been in it for as long as we have. I think that's what keeps us going, because it is a great group of people.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jason as much as I did. We're going to have him back to continue our conversation on the next episode, so please stay tuned for that coming out. If you need expert advice on a project or looking for representation from a great sales force, reach out to us here at CBM. That's cbmrep.com. Please leave us a review, and thanks again for joining us on Power the Network.